10 years from now, you could lose your job to a robot. In all likelihood, a robot that does your job better than you ever could. It's inevitable that, over time, more and more jobs can and will be replaced by automation and a variety of labor-saving technologies. And while the exact number is up for debate, a major study by Oxford University estimates that nearly half of current US jobs are likely to be automated or computerized with our current technological trends. Already, we see robots and artificial intelligence driving our cars, taking over the farming industry, writing entire news articles, and even diagnosing and treating medical patients. In grocery stores and McDonald's, low-wage jobs have been replaced by customer-facing robots and touchscreens. Depending on how we respond to this trend, our possible futures can look very different. But first, let's start with a history of automation in general. If you're willing to go back far enough, humanity's evolution has always been directly related to our ability to mechanize and improve upon our physical abilities with tools. Our bodies and societies have progressed alongside and as a direct result of our ability to create objects that make our lives easier, that allow us to produce and consume more efficiently and in greater quantities. At first, it was simple handheld tools made of stone, then crude metals, until eventually we started truly automating basic tasks by powering the first primitive machines with flowing water, steam, and finally, fossil fuels. We continued innovating, creating ever more complex instruments, until they moved beyond completing simple tasks and started dealing with abstract concepts, the same way our brains can. Very quickly, we get to something like proper automation, machines doing things on their own. Specifically, we get to automation under our current economic model, capitalism. Since the origins of modern capitalism coincide roughly with the beginning of industrialization in Britain, that's where we'll start. At its birth, industrialization radically changed many things. The new machines of the industrial era were nothing like the tools that had dominated the history of humanity. They were bigger, more complex, and they needed several people with very particular roles just to function properly. While this is going on, machines are growing in their power. They do more, produce more, and take up an ever greater chunk of the responsibilities of workers. And this starts creating problems. Some of the first observers of this era, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, were quick to realize the impact that the ever more capable steam-powered machines would have on this new labor force. They saw, of course, the slums and depths of poverty that these industrial towns had created. But more than that, they saw a new form of power emerge. Automation subjected workers to invisible pressures within the workplace when, as production processes became more automated, human workers had to adapt to the pace set by machines, a pace determined by the capitalist who manufactured and implemented them. Unsurprisingly, this feature of automation hasn't disappeared under more advanced stages of capitalism. Take Amazon warehouses, where workers who are entirely reliant on now fully automated systems have to adapt their working speed to the inhumane rate of maximally optimized robots. Workers lose their independence and their very humanity when they have to complete tasks in 11 seconds or less and take no breaks, otherwise they threaten to disrupt a long production chain of which they are only a minor part. Machines gave the capitalists much more. For starters, these machines made for a perfectly exploitable employee, and it's pretty obvious why. A machine demands no wages. It doesn't demand adequate working conditions, reasonable hours, or bathroom breaks. A machine costs what it costs to buy and maintain, and every single penny of its 24-hour workday afterwards goes back to the capitalist. It's a perfect arrangement, allowing the owner class to threaten mass unemployment and eroding whatever resistance workers had created with their collective power. If the employee is not entirely replaced, their job either becomes more menial and alienating or more brutal and unprofitable. Today, this process is happening across all sectors of the economy. Factory jobs were of course the first to go, but they were soon followed by many service and white-collar jobs. As AI progresses, even highly specialized tasks are delegated to machines, taking with them jobs for which humans are no longer the cheapest option. And this poses a dilemma for workers. Asking for higher wages is both good and necessary, especially as living costs everywhere go up. But it puts them and their industries at greater risk of their labor being automated. You can't bargain when someone is holding all the chips. So, rather than settling for low wages out of fear of automation, we should embrace automation, demand higher wages, or perhaps some form of universal basic income, which will not only be necessary for workers, but may even be necessary for capitalism itself to function. But before we get to that, let's take automation under our capitalist system to its logical conclusion based on where we are today. Let's picture what the future of capitalist automation might look like. Technology, AI, and automation in general have improved to such a high degree that the only remaining jobs performed by humans are the few that can't be learned by an algorithm or performed by a set of pistons. The pace of change of new technologies will have gone too quickly to corral people into new job sectors, to the extent that these job sectors even exist. Robots do it all. In a capitalist society of widespread automation and computerization, three classes naturally emerge. At the top sit the rich and powerful, those who own the machines. Below them, those who still have non-computerized jobs and who will naturally be mainly providing services to the wealthy. And underneath them, the jobless masses, the majority of humanity. Things look pretty grim in this future. The first consequence is, predictably, extreme inequality. Under our current means-tested, insufficient, work-conditional methods of welfare distribution and the total absence of a cap to wealth accumulation, existing trends will only continue to drive larger and larger gaps between the rich and the poor. The effects of inequality we see today will only become more extreme, and with even less recourse to organized power. That leads to the second dramatic consequence of a highly automated capitalist society: corporate totalitarianism. A capitalist monopoly on robots virtually guarantees an even more dangerous monopoly on violence. If the ruling elite are no longer reliant on the working class to flourish, workers will be regarded as useless. And if they try to fight back for a better society that benefits the majority, the capitalist state and corporate elite can use their monopoly on technology to crush resistance in even more frightening ways. While today, interests between workers and capitalists are contradictory, a capitalist economy manufactures mutual dependence between the two groups. Workers depend on wages to live, and capitalists rely on workers to produce. Once that relationship is gone, suddenly an entire class of people becomes disposable. To quash the threat that an organized movement would pose to this new social order, the ruling class can either respond with totalitarian control or minimal concession. This would be the endgame of inequality. A tiny handful of godlike figures would have total control of this automated society, and everyone else would be left to die. This is what extreme automation can look like under capitalism. It is disempowering for the many and inconceivably profitable for the few. At the top, those who benefited from millions of jobs being cut. At the bottom, everyone else. This will happen, because in many ways, it already is. But what does an alternate future, one under a socialist society, look like? The simple answer: much better, unless you're within the top 1% of the capitalist class. As a quick refresher, a socialist economy is one in which the means of production, meaning factories, machines, farms, and so on, are owned in common rather than by private individuals. In this kind of system, automation looks very different. While automation under any system can bring improvements in the quality of life for all, under a socialist economy, it does not do so at the expense of the security of the individual. You might lose your job to a more productive machine, but that won't suddenly throw you into your savings and threaten to kick you out of your home. Quite the contrary. In practice, this can mean any number of things. Where innovations in medicine or agriculture are developed, they are no longer held hostage by intellectual property patents so that only a few people can gain access and only for the highest prices. Vaccines and other life-saving innovations don't have to be life-saving and profitable to be worthwhile. They can just be life-saving. This is innovation under a very wide lens, but automation specifically works in just the same way. And the best way to prove that is to look at how automation affects work under a socialist economy. Whereas the capitalist exploits the advancements of technology to pit the workers against themselves, bringing down their wages, working conditions, or kicking them out of their job entirely, a socialist society has no such pressure to exert. Work being taken out of human hands is just that, no strings attached. Even if automation does not abolish all work, in capitalist or socialist economies alike, it will definitely reduce the amount of work we have to do. Whereas a capitalist system responds to this with unemployment, worsening working conditions, lower wages, or even meaningless jobs that only serve to increase profits without improving anything, a democratic organization of the economy can simply grant the worker more free time. Picture your average day at work when automation has all but taken over. With fewer responsibilities and fewer hours of human work needed, divided across more people whose jobs are also largely taken care of, a workday could be just a few hours long, if that. a work week just a few days. In a system where your survival isn't directly tied to the hours you work, automation is a blessing, both for you and everyone else. Automation grants you more freedom rather than punishing you for simply existing in a society with scientific progress. It could allow us to move beyond our basic necessities and start climbing up our hierarchy of needs the world over, to start pursuing what really interests us in life, to take up educational, artistic, innovative, or creative pursuits that we would normally not be able to under capitalism without taking immense personal risks or being born into similarly immense privilege. The truth is, we've been waiting for this for decades. Back in the 1930s, economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that technological advancements would allow his grandkids' generation to only work for 15 hours a week, long before automation and artificial intelligence showed us the extent to which human labor could be replaced. The only reason we aren't there yet is the unnecessary capitalist obsession with always extracting more profit. But we can improve our lives without that suicidal greed. And so long as we continue to ignore that fact, our future is clear. This is an incredibly important and complex topic, and we've only just scratched the surface here. Thanks for watching.